Hello. Today I'd like to talk about the current situation of the United States and Russia. I will not do it with China because in this particular situation in the Middle East and in Europe, China is trying to avoid get involved in these problems. I'm trying to go around Europe and Africa to doing business as usual, trying to avoid a confrontation with the United States, which is provoking such a situation in the South China Seas. So China is trying to not get too much involved in these problems. Now, Russia and the United States, of course, are in a sort of collision course. That is very clear. The United States is provoking as much as it can to Russia to destabilize it. First, trying to do it in Ukraine, trying to do it now in the Middle East. Is not precisely against Russia, but Russia and Iran are opposing the United States' objectives. The objective of the United States is to control the Middle East. That particular region is called and is taken care by the Central Commands. By the way, the United States divided the world in regional commands, and we have, I think, about six. The Pacific commands that include China. The Central Command that includes Egypt in Africa and all the Middle East and Central Asia. The European commands that include Europe and Asian part of Europe and Russian part of Asia. So it includes Europe and part of Asia. The Northern Command that include United States and Canada, of course, reaching to the pole, North Pole. Recently, about a few years ago, created the African Command, especially in view of to control the China advances in that area. And then the Southern Command it lately activated in view of solving the problem of Venezuela to regain all the leverage and, of course, the dominion it has in the past of Venezuela, because Venezuela is a big oil producer and is at only 4 days of the United States coast. And then the Southern Command to control the Atlantic, and the Pacific Command is controlled by some areas of the Southern Command is in the Pacific is under its control. But of course, their current allies countries of Colombia, Peru, and Chile. Now, I have to say a few words about Argentina. With this change of president, and he is taken care by the rights movement, trying to reestablish the relations, just like in the era of the military junta on those particular eras. Similar, not the same. And also, like in the 90s with the Peronist government as well, of Menem. He turned like a sunflower. He said something and looked like a real nationalistic type, and then he changed totally and did a neoliberal economics that led Argentina to a catastrophe, economic catastrophe. That's a different problem. But I was referring to the Southern Command. And they are very much concerned with Brazil. Brazil is an emerging power. So any time that there is some emerging power in any particular region, they activate their operations in order to weaken or destabilize that particular country. In the case of Brazil, is not a very serious problem for the United States so far. But I like to I diverse myself a little bit. But the problem is with Russia. They tried in as I said before, but they tried in Ukraine, which the United States is very successful in controlling that country. And the politics of Russian President Putin is of containment in Ukraine and try to do some damage control. Of course, they did the natural thing to retake Crimea because it's a geopolitical imperative. And the other problem is in Syria. Iran and Russia are trying to avoid the fall of Syria. Russia, in the last few months, have to intervene directly because the Syrian government was in the verge of collapsing. After 4 years of war with the rebel opposition force, or whatever you call them, or jihadist, and he was exhausted. And those opposition forces, they were controlled by the United States and their vassal states in Europe, France, UK, the other ones. And Russia tried to intervene because the problem of the ISIS or Daesh, which was not created directly, but indirectly was created from by the United States when it invaded Iraq. When they destabilized Iraq, dissolved with Brenner the viceroy on Iraq, dissolved the army, dissolved the Ba'athist Party, which in Syria is established sort type of government. The Ba'athist parties are remains of the Cold War era, when the secular movement and socialist type of movement where it took the government in Iraq and Syria. And if I'm going to do some history, we have to think about Nasser and Assad, the father of the current president. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, those ideas, socialist ideas, secular ideas, they evaporate. And after the impact of the invasion, direct intervention, and the invasion of in the Middle East of the United States, especially in Iraq, that created a backlash and create that the jihadist problems that they want to return to the caliphate. Now this is sort of, they create a Frankenstein that they cannot control now. And now in the melee they are getting involved as well, France and the UK, and everybody sending planes to bomb the ISIS. But the ones who are doing this effectively are the Russian air forces. By the way, Russia took this opportunity to show the world, especially the world, the United States and its minor allies, that they are ready with the most advanced weapons, especially cruise missiles. They launch them from the Caspian Sea. They launch cruise missiles from strategic bombers that flew from the northern part of Russia, all the Baltic, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, go back and forth, and they launch cruise missiles. And lately they did it from a submarine, sort of a triad. And of course, they have to put some troops in the ground to protect the area around the airports where they are the ports in Latvia and the air force bases, because I think they will not allow a Dien Bien Phu like the French did it in Indochina. I think so. I hope so. But in geopolitics, who can tell? We never know. Lately, the problem was increased tenfold by the attack of the Turkish Air Force to a Russian airplane. And this creates more tensions, and since Erdogan and Putin had previously good relations and tried to get a good constructive, as they call it nowadays, constructive endeavors. They like trying to make Turkey a country of transit of the pipelines to the consumer. We are located in Europe. In energy, we have the producers, the transportations, and the consumers. The consumers are in Europe. The producers are in the Middle East, in Central Asia, and Russia. And the consumers and the transportation in Europe is Ukraine, but they did it in the Baltic, under the Baltic Sea. So Russia is trying to avoid Ukraine. Nevertheless, Russia is intervening in Syria and trying to avoid pressure in Ukraine and freeze that problem so far, but it's not resolved. It's not resolved, and I don't see the way to resolve it peacefully unless the two regions, they call the Republic, the Lugansk and Donetsk Republic, surrender themselves. Otherwise, so far, the Kiev government will not allow those autonomy areas as they try to do it in the Minsk Accords. But both sides, I would say the United States, the European Union, United States didn't took part indirectly because they give the orders to the smaller partners. And Russia, Ukraine, and the independent republics, so-called republics. And this is sort of a frozen conflict. But if we look at that problem from a bigger perspective, we have Russia assuming a defense position, the United States assuming an attack position, offensive position. So whatever is the outcome in Ukraine, the United States is in better position than 5 years ago, no doubt. And Russia is trying to solve a problem that was not able to solve 5 or 10 years ago. They were concerned with other problems. I don't know. I don't understand. Now, the way they, at present, the situation is from the military point, everybody is saying that trying to attack ISIS and destroy it. Russia is trying to support the Assad government. By the way, Russia, who happened to inherit the Soviet Union, which happened to have a defense, a pact or agreement in 1956. Since that era, Russia was involved in Syria. Now the present situation from the military point of view is a sort of, let's say, since it's in the land theater of operation, but it's very similar to sea operation, because these are wide open spaces, are not direct front lines. The lines moves, and we have what they call it in the sea, the line of communication are the roads, and the ports might be the cities, small towns, big towns. So they denied access. So we have area control, area denial, and power projection in terms of naval warfare. But of course, it's a theater of land powers and air powers. The great casualties of this type of war is because there is a regular army with mechanized forces, and the light army, the opposition, which are basically infantry organizations and irregular organizations, they try to fight in the urban areas, which they have better chances to make a stand. And of course, is very mobile. But the ones who are in the middle are the civilian populations. They cannot go nowhere. To the desert they cannot go. So they try to run away, of course, because where the opposition forces find themselves, first the regular army bombs the situation, the positions, with airplanes or with artillery and with direct fire, to flood them, and then go in with the infantry. This type of urban warfare was practiced in Grozny, in Chechnya. There's no other way to do it unless you have the possibilities to have a larger army with maybe have 1 million soldiers or something like that to cover that large areas. Now, the areas that is taken over by the ISIS, they think that to control those areas along the Euphrates River, or there are two rivers, Euphrates and Tigris, that go to the Gulf. So they are controlled, and they lead to Baghdad. They pass by Baghdad. So we have, the actors are United States, Russia, which are the, let's say, out of the region actors. In the regional actors are, of course, Syria, Turkey, the Kurds, Iraq, Iran, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan. Who benefits from all of this instability and chaos? Well, the main beneficiaries are United States and Israel. By the way, the Arabs are about 400 million Arabs. Israel is about 6 million persons and 1.5 million second-rate citizens of Israel, which happen to be Arabs, Palestine Arabs. There are another 4 million Palestinians. We have Egypt, that is not very much involved, but have problems in the Sinai. And Turkey, which Erdogan trying to revive some sort of Islamist idea with the prime minister, which happened to be a very pan-Islamist. And Erdogan, there are two conceptions. The concept of the former Ottoman sphere of influence, and Islamist approach, trying to retake control of some part of the Syria region. By the way, Turkey have some what they call Turkmens. They became 1,000 years ago from Central Asia and established themselves in Anatolia. But there are some remains of Turkmen in the northern part of where the Wahhabis are living, Dibit or something like this, which the Russian Air Forces are bombing very intensely. And of course, the rhetorics, the first casualty in wars is always the truth. All the parties lies. And all the parties try to take advantage of their information and their disinformation. The one who suffer are the people. There are 300,000 persons who been killed, children, elderly people, normal people. 4 million that trying to immigrate, which is another problem to Europe, especially to Germany. All of them want to go to Germany. And they go through the Balkans, and they go through the Mediterranean. We have also the other liberated country, which was Libya. They're going through the Mediterranean to Italy and then trying to move upwards. So we have an impact of the European in the Middle East. We have the impact of the United States in the Middle East. We have the Russian interest, defensive position. We have Iran and Turkey. And this is the situation nowadays. And we'll see how it evolves in the next month or the next few months. And also, we have to look very carefully in Ukraine. And who knows where else next year. Well, for the time being, that will be all. But one thing is for sure, life goes on, fortunately. Thank you.